Hello, and welcome to the second part of this episode on Firewall Threat Defense Private Cloud Clustering. My name is Mark Brereton, and I'm an instructor at Cisco. In the first part of this episode, showed you how to configure a private cloud cluster consisting of two nodes. One of them was a control node, and one is a data node. If you haven't seen that, it might be worth watching it before continuing with this one. When the cluster is established, which it is, the next thing you might want to do is to configure the interfaces and enable routing. And that's really the focus of this second part. So one of the things you have to do is when you configure the interfaces is that you have to assign two sets of IP addresses. One of those addresses is the main address of the cluster, and that's fixed. And then the other address is a pool of addresses that gets assigned to each of the members of the cluster, including the control node. Why two addresses? Well, that main address is used for management purposes, and you have one of those for each interface. And the pool addresses are aimed for things like routing. So we can see that in the subnet 16, the cluster control has an address which ends with .18. On the subnet 8, that the cluster control node has an address that ends with .10. And then the pool of addresses, which get assigned dynamically to the cluster members, including the control node, 12 to 14 for subnet 8, and 20 to 22 for subnet 16. Okay, now you will need to configure the pool of addresses before you configure. And once you've done that, you will need to enable some form of routing. In this demo environment, we're going to be using OSPF, as mentioned in part 1. OSPF is already configured in CSR1 and CSR2. We just need to do the same on the cluster. I think that's really just the main thing covers. Oh, one other thing is that it's really down to the upstream and downstream routers, CSR1 or CSR2, to load balance the traffic through the cluster members. The two supported methods, one is equal cost multipath, and the other one is policy-based routing. Well, in my demonstration, it's the routes are going to be equal cost. We should see that. So let's see exactly what we're going to cover in this demo. We're going to start off by just doing a quick review of the cluster config to see who's the control node, who is the data node. And then we're going to go ahead and configure the interfaces and configure OSPF. And once we've done that, we're going to go through some tests to make sure everything is working okay. So as a reminder, a more in-depth detail of this can be found in Cisco's configuration guide. I'm using version 7.4.2, so that's the one I've selected, but there are alternative versions as well. Remember that 7.2 was the earliest release where private cloud clustering and actually public cloud was first introduced. So in this configuration guide in device operations, you'll find that section for private cloud clustering. If you're new to OSPF, then the other part I'm going to demonstrate is in the routing section of this guide. You'll find details on OSPF. Before taking a look at my manager, let's go and take a look at the devices. So you can see that Attila can currently not ping a device connected. There's no route currently. If I take a look at CSR1 and review these settings, here are the interface settings. I'll check to see OSPF is enabled, but at the moment, CSR1 can't see a neighbor, and CSR2, I'll just check the neighbor. It can't see the neighbor either. It's the part in the middle that's missing. Okay, and then a quick review of the interfaces, and we can see that we've just got the VTAP interface here, Giganet Ethernet 3, And we've also got the VNI interface 10.10.3.1. And let's take a look on FTD2. And we can see the same things, although this time it's 10.10.4.2 and 10.10.3.2. Okay, so logging into the manager, we can see in the devices menu that the cluster is established with currently FTDA as the control node, FTDB as the data node. Now, prior to configuring the interfaces, I have configured the address pools, which I'm going to need. I would recommend, if you've never done this before, plan very carefully. So you've got a pool for subnet 8 and one for subnet 16, and which fits my environment. And I've got the following mask as well. Okay, so those have been pre-configured by me, just really to save some time, if nothing else. So I'll go back to device management. And now I'm going to configure the cluster and go to the interfaces. And first of all, configure interface G00. Okay, so this interface is the one for subnet 16. Make sure you enable it. I have used security zones. Security zones are a great feature of Cisco firewalls. If you've never used them before, I'd recommend you use them. Take a look at the documentation first. Very powerful capability. And then IP4. So this is where you have to assign the two addresses. The static address is for the cluster, and it's used for management. And that should be, in my environment, should be 10.00.18. Just making sure I enter these correctly. And then select that pool, which is the sub 16 pool. And then that seems to have gone okay. And then the other interface for my environment, this one is subnet 8. So I'm connected to CSR2. Make sure it's enabled. Again, select the security zone, which is sub 8 zone IP4. Have to assign two addresses for this interfaces as well. This one is 10.00.10/29 and then subnet 8. So that virtual IP address should be on the same subnet as the pool, but it shouldn't be one of the addresses which has been allocated in the pool. And I'm going to select OK to that. So that's the first part done. I'm going to save that. Then the next part is the routing part. Again, this isn't an in-depth analysis on OSPF, so it's just a really simple OSPF config, but enough to demonstrate. So I'll go to OSPF, and I'm going to enable process 1. And then I have to add this area. So the OSPF here is just a simple backbone area 0. So I need to make sure I select that area 0 here. And then really the important part is that which networks is this for? And this is going to be for subnet 8 and subnet 16. You can see those different subnets. I did pre-configure these, although if I hadn't, I could have gone and added them here with the object management tool. Now I'm going to select OK to that and then save. Save once again, and then I'm going to deploy. Now this deployment is going to take a little while. Okay, while I'm waiting for that to deploy, I'm going to go back here and do some testing. So if I try this ping, if I try and ping a host, that's not working. If I go to CSR1, I'm going to check to see if there are any OSPF neighbors. There aren't any at the moment. So I'm going to leave that running a while. And when that ping starts working, then that's a signal to me that everything's configured okay. Okay, so we can see that suddenly that ping has started, so that's encouraging. We can see that the deployment is completed as well. So let's go and take a look at some other things. So if I go back to CSR1 and check the neighbor, we can see the neighbors now. which is both members of the cluster. If we go to CSR2, we can see the same two neighbors there. So that's all encouraging. And if we check the routing table, which is this one here, notice for the 10.0.0.8 network, we can, for both networks, we can see these equal cost routes. We can do that for CSR1 and also CSR2 as well. We can see the same equal costs. Okay, so all looking good so far. Now, if I go and take a look at FTDA, renewed look at those interfaces. So notice here that FTDA, which is a control node, we can see two addresses. There's a virtual address, which is the cluster address, because this is a control node, as well as a local address 10.0.0.20, which is used for routing. Go and take a look at the equivalent on FTDB, then we can just see the single address, because this is a data node. It's not the control node. Once again, you can type in the show cluster info if you just wanted to verify who is the control node. A is the control node, and FTDB is the data node in this case. Okay, so what other things can we do? Well, if we go and take a look in event analysis, I'm quite a fan of using unified events. And if we go live, now traffic, currently it's most of these are going to A. If I had more traffic in my environment, we'd see some going to B as well. So that's traffic being seen by A from, and if I actually, let's go back here. So why don't I do a ping the other way around, just create some more traffic as well. Okay, so most of these are going through A at the moment, not too much of a big deal for what I'm about to demonstrate. So one of the things I wanted to show you is FTDA is if I stop that ping, and instead of the ping, let me try a connection, an SSH connection to 90. And I'm going to enter the password. Okay, so from it till I've logged into Bledder. Now, one of the reasons I've done that is that if I go to FTDA and type in this command show con detail, if you examine this very carefully, it's showing you this key here, FTDA ID 0, FTDB ID 1. So we can see from this connection, this SSH connection here, the owners, and we've got this 0 here. If I go to FTDB and type in that same command, show con detail, then I'm not seeing that connection, because for this case, A is handling that connection. So the last thing I'm going to demonstrate to you is if I go back to device management, so here in device management, and show you something I showed you in part 1. If I go into edit the cluster, and then into cluster live status, and A is currently the control node. So if I disable no clustering, I'm not breaking the cluster, I'm just saying take A out of action for the moment. That's going to cause an election of a new control node. Okay, while I'm doing that, let's go back and check the ping. The ping's still, yeah, so I've still got this connection. Sorry, there was a brief interrupt. Still got that. Still got the connection. So there was a brief interrupt there. That is working. And now if I go and take a look at FTDA, so if I view that connection detail, you can see that's gone from A. But if I go to B and view the connection, so we're maintaining that connection on this other node. And now you can see that it's actually FTDB. You can see the ID here 1 to show that, and that's just something I wanted to show you. So there's many other things I could try demonstrating to you here, but that really was the aim of this demo. So in summary, we've seen we started with a cluster which was pre-configured. Then we saw how to configure the IP addresses, one for the cluster and one for the local nodes. and enable OSPF, we saw OSPF working. And if we disable clustering for one of the nodes, how the connection is still passed over to another. Thank you for watching.